6-1.
Shri Guru Vandanam. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of real suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord verse after verse. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and the loving master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us, and give us the shade of your lotus feet. May your fame be spread all over the world. We take shelter of your lotus feet, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya
Janavalabha Girivaradari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe.
Jaya Shri Radhe.
Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Grantha Raja Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Gaura Premanand. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This morning we're continuing with our Scientific Saturday theme, and we're studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, which is entitled The Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And this first verse, of course, is the introduction to this chapter. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atha te sampravakshyami tatvanam lakshanam pritak yad viditva vimuchyeta purushaha prakritayar gunai. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Yadviditva vimuchyeta.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Purusha prakritayar gunai.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Atate sampravakshyami.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak.
Tatvanam lakshanam pritak. Yad viditva vimuchyeta. Purusha prakritar gunai. Ladies? Atate sampravakshami. Tatvanam lakshanam pritak. Tadvidva vimuchyeta. Purusha prakritar gunai. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Atate sampravakshami. Tatvanam lakshanam pritak. Yad viditva vimuchyeta. Purusha prakritar gunai. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Atate sampravakshami. Tatvanam lakshanam pritak. Yad viditva vimuchyeta. Purusha prakritar gunai. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. The personality of Godhead said, Atta, now, te, to you, sampravakshami, I shall describe, tatvanam, of the categories of the Absolute Truth, lakshanam, the distinctive features, pritak, one by one, yat, which, viditva, knowing, vimuchyeta, one can be released, purusha, any person, prakritai, of the material nature, gunai, from the modes. Translation. The personality of Godhead, Kapila continued, My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the Absolute Truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. Please repeat. The personality of Godhead.
The personality of Godhead.
Kapila continued. My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the Absolute Truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, only through devotional service. Bhaktya mam abhijanati. As stated in the Bhagavatam, the object of devotional service is Mam, Krishna. And as explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, to understand Krishna means to understand Krishna in his personal form, with his internal energy, his external energy, his expansions, and his incarnations. There are many diverse departments of knowledge in understanding Krishna. Sankhya philosophy is especially meant for persons who are conditioned by this material world. It is generally understood by the Parampara system, or by disciplic succession, to be the science of devotional service. Preliminary studies of devotional service have already been explained. Now the analytical study of devotional service will be explained by the Lord, who says that by such an analytical study, one becomes freed from the modes of material nature. The same assertion is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Tatomam tatvato gyatva. By understanding the Lord according to various categories, one can become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. This is also explained here. By understanding the science of devotional service in Sankhya philosophy, one can become free from the modes of material nature. The eternal self, after becoming freed from the spell of material nature, becomes eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. As long as one has even a slight desire to enjoy or lord it over material nature, there is no chance of his being freed from the influence of nature's material modes. Therefore, one has to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead analytically, as explained in the Sankhya system of philosophy by Lord Kapiladev. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Atatse Samprakshami Tatvanam Lakshanam Pratak Yad Viditva Vimuchyeta Purusha Prakritaya Gunahai. The personality of Godhead, Kapila continued, My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the absolute truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurimritam Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, this continues our discussions on Scientific Saturdays, and a lot of what we need to consider within any analysis of what we call the science of bhakti, or even when we're engaged in discussions about the science of this world, is a deep understanding of our metaphysics that are being illuminated in these particular chapters. Chapter 26 is a very famous chapter. It's the one with all the different elements in it. And it's the one there where we go zoop, 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 trying to get, where's the next pastime? Where does it get exciting again? Because this is difficult stuff, isn't it? It's not easy. There's a lot of there's every verse practically in this chapter is a new concept. There's a new kind of term that isn't part of our usual atma, karma, guna thing. There's just so many terms in this thing, and they seem to be explained in different ways, in different verses. And it doesn't, but there is a consistency, but it's not always so obvious. So the previous chapter actually is very interesting because it starts as if it's going to be also a lot of am I on the right chapter here? Yeah. It starts with a kind of interesting question. And it's really Devahuti talking about, she says, I'm sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, I've fallen into the abyss of ignorance. So basically, please get me out of this delusion. You're here to disseminate knowledge. Dispel my great delusion, by which I'm engaged in Maya, in your Maya, and I've identified myself with this body and all the consequent. So therefore, she's asking for enlightenment along those lines. But the focus of that chapter is, as per the Bhagavatam, on Krishna, on pure devotion, on what it means to develop our devotion. But having established that, now Kapila starts, and he starts with this word atta. And this is very interesting because this is the word that begins usually a major bhashya, a major thesis. Tato Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the time to inquire about Brahman. The Yoga Sutra begins with the same thing. Atto Yoga Anushashanam. Now is the time to study and to about yoga. So this is Atta Te Sampravakshami. Now I'm going to explain Tattvanam, the different tattvas, the different truths, the different categories, and their lakshanam, their characteristics. And we might think, well, this is all very theoretical. Is this going to be of any help to me personally? But what does Kapila say? Yad viditva. When you know this, by knowing this, what? Vimuchyeta. You're going to be liberated. This is going to help you get liberated. It's worth knowing. Our metaphysics in the Bhagavatam is actually quite incredible. And although it requires a little more focus and analysis, I personally believe it is very rewarding for the devotees. Because I think it does help us understand the nature of our entanglement. And really that's what's going to come out in this chapter. How we, as eternal spirit souls, who have got nothing to do with this world in reality, are completely wrapped up in it, so much we can't even think about how to get out. It's crazy. You know, that consciousness, which belongs in the spiritual world, which, when you look at the other features that have been talked about in terms of consciousness, you know, it has got nothing to do with the modes. It is the consciousness. The Atma is absolutely pure. It is never entangled. It is eternal. It is full of bliss. It is all-knowing. These are the kind of major kind of qualities of consciousness. But that's not how we're experiencing it at the moment. So it is worth delving into this. And in the work that we are doing with the Atma paradigm and the work within the BI, we are being very consciously focused that we are going to analyze what the material world is, and we're going to offer insights to society based on the perspective that consciousness is a transcendental phenomenon. That's the way to see the world, from the position of consciousness being transcendental and its entanglement. Material science tries to analyze consciousness by looking at material psychology and saying, well, what does that say about it? Now, there are certain things that you can gain by looking at the effect when you want to understand the cause. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that, particularly when in considering the nature of the universe, you know, and if there is this universe, is there a cause, is there a personality, is there a creator behind it? But he gives the example, it's like a pot. That is an effect. And it gives a glimpse that behind this pot, there has to be a potter. But that doesn't tell you a lot about the potter. Might tell you whether he's good at it or not, whether he's expert or not. And in that regard, as we kind of took the tram up, there was a poster for Myro's new exhibition here. And Paramdama says, "Is that art?" She was questioning the artist. She was questioning the cause behind the poster, in that, you know, we're looking at this poster. It doesn't tell me if this artist actually knows how to hold a paintbrush. But, you know, that's not necessarily what they would say is the only purpose of art. But from the effect, you can get some inkling of the cause, but you don't get a lot. So material analysis from the point of view of what the material world is will not give us a very clear picture of what is behind the causation. And we can see that because people can look at life and think, well, these are just chemicals working, therefore they must have come from some simple chemicals. That's insanity when you actually consider what the effect, what biology is all about and what life actually does. Similarly, to say that the universe comes from nothingness. you know. Fortunately, enough philosophers are teasing the physicists and saying, you can't say that. That can't be right, you know. There's got to be some causation for this universe. So, but what is that causation? What does it involve? That's what this chapter is going to reveal. And this chapter ultimately is the foundation for our whole understanding of how, not just how we as conscious beings become entangled in this world, but how Krishna actually creates it. And that's really important. There's huge things to be involved here. I'm working with a team of devotees in the BI, and our specific challenge is to really analyze what we call cosmogenesis. What is the origins of this universe? And in order to do that, we have astrophysicists who are analyzing what all the scientists are saying, the philosophers and all their arguments and ideas and where that's going. But at the same time, we're also delving very deeply and trying to understand the different verses that here in the Bhagavatam. Because that's our perspective. We are coming from the perspective of Krishna and pure consciousness. So, in a number of the talks that we hope to give within Scientific Saturdays, we want to delve into the nature of how matter works. Because once you understand how matter works with the influence of consciousness, you can start to understand why the Bhagavatam has its view in terms of how life works. And you can start to understand why the universe, as a facilitation of life, is formed in its particular way, and how all that works. So really, when many devotees, you know, if you ever say someone, you know, yeah, I'm doing something with the BI, they go, oh yeah, what about the flat earth? What about, or what about the fifth canto? That's what devotees think this BI and science in Krishna consciousness is all about. But actually, the reason there is bewilderment on those points is because, I'm afraid, devotees have not studied the metaphysics in the second and third cantos particularly. We have not studied that. We have skimmed over it. And then we arrive in the fifth canto and go, wow, what does that all that mean? How does that work? This doesn't compute anymore. And it doesn't compute from a materialistic training and perspective. But it does make sense when we are deeply immersed in the metaphysics. Now that's, it is a huge study, and you know, I am certainly no expert. And every time I read it, I try and might get a little bit more out of it. But I just have strong feeling that there is so much to explore within this, and for us to try and learn and to discuss and to, you know, we will get insight. So I'm hoping that I'm going to give you a little introduction to this chapter today. So we've already kind of talked about the Atma as the entity of consciousness, and we're going to hear about how the energy of the Atma becomes entangled in the material energy. We've already talked about a little bit about mind and intelligence and false ego when we discussed those different analogies. So that's helpful, and that's going to reappear again. So this chapter is going to talk about consciousness, its entanglement, and the process of creation that facilitates that entanglement. I want to start with just helping to appreciate consciousness as the as the aspect that experiences. There's a story of a guru who asked his disciple, "By what light do you see? By what light do you see?" And the disciple goes, "Well, by the daytime it's the sun. The sun is my light. And at night time I have a lamp." And the guru says, "Yes, but by what light do you see that light?" And the disciple goes, "By my eyes. My eyes. They're the things that are picking up the light. So it is the light of my eyes that is seeing things." And the guru says, "Yeah, but by what light do your eyes see? What's enabling your eyes to actually have sight, to see?" Because, and the disciple goes, "Oh, well, the mind. The mind actually takes what the eyes are seeing, and that's where the light is. It's in the mind." And the guru's, "No, that's not enough. By what light does the mind see? What is actually the light of perception, the light of experience, the light of sentience? It's not material things. It's not light waves. It's not the sense organs. It's not even the inert mind. What is the light by which we see?" And the disciple clicks. That's the self, the Atma, which is Atma Drik, as Narad Muni says. The Atma Drik means it is self-illuminating. Consciousness doesn't require anything external for its ability to see. Consciousness experiences. Consciousness has its own illumination for its ability to experience. That's not light of the electromagnetic spectrum. And it's why Krishna says in the 15th chapter that the spiritual world is not illuminated by sun, moon, fire, electricity. No. It doesn't need other things for consciousness to see. Consciousness has its own energy of sentience, of consciousness, of awareness, of ability to experience. And that's the chit potency. That's our knowingness. That's our ability to experience. And when the chit potency emanates, basically consciousness is relational. We're as conscious entities, and now we're talking about us in the spiritual world, okay? Because the only way to really understand consciousness is to consider what consciousness is like in the spiritual world. Because in the material world, our consciousness is covered, conditioned, and working in a very different. But ultimately, the Atma is always doing the same thing. The Atma is shining its light on something that it is not it. That's what consciousness does. We shine our light of awareness onto something that is not us. And when that is within our light, we experience its properties. That's our relationship with Krishna. We turn our consciousness to Krishna and we become aware of his properties. There's a connect, and it's not just awareness, I've read something, it's absorption, it's connection, it's relationship. The connection between two conscious beings in the spiritual world is a perfected one. When they attend their consciousness on each other, it is a complete connection, an awareness of the properties, the characteristics. So that is the atmatric function. And when this light of our Chit Shakti, and this is the point that is made in the previous chapter, and it starts here, that it continues in this one, that, you know, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has no beginning, he is transcendental to the modes, he is self-effulgent. It uses the word Swayam Jyoti. He has his own light, and by whom the whole creation, and as his pastimes, he accepts the subtle material energy. So now what we're going to hear about is how Krishna facilitates the soul's coming into the material energy. And so this leads us into the idea that because of forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of the material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, i.e., now we are in the material energy. What do? We apply the activities to myself. These activities of my hand moving, I think that's me. See, that's me. No, I'm the spirit soul inside here, wondering what's going on. But but I apply the activities of my body to me. And I apply the activities of everything that's happening around me to my circumstances, to my situation. So material consciousness, and this is what we're going to look at, what we mean by material consciousness. And this appears in a word called chittam, which is very important in this chapter. And not a word that actually you hear very much about. Chittam. We talk about mana, buddhih, ahankara, and the Atma. But what we're going to hear in a minute is that there's a fourth aspect that has to be understood, and that's what's being analysed here. Chitta. What is this chitta? We will come to that. And so it's been said here that material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, is thus affected by conditioned life. And there's this very nice, the next verse is very important. So, just to kind of repeat what that is saying, material consciousness is the cause of our conditioned life. Who's in charge of our material consciousness? Ourselves, isn't it? Our own consciousness is in our control. That's what free will is. Free will means that where you want to shine your light on, your light of consciousness on, that's up to you. Krishna doesn't program that. Nothing else does. Things might vie for your attention, but where you choose to shine your light on it's up to us. And the basic choices are, do we shine our light on Krishna and the pastimes of the spiritual world? Or do we shine our light on the material world and what we think it's got to offer us? That's the basic choice that is made in material consciousness. So, the spirit soul does not do anything. We're here as the passenger, as we said, in the chariot of this body. We're the passenger. We have desired. We have made our case that we want to enjoy what the material world's got to offer. And things are moving because of that. But we're actually transcendental to such activities, but we're afflicted by them. This cause of the conditioned soul, material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. So material nature is the cause of the body, the senses we've got, our ability to perceive and to engage with the world. That's what the senses are really about. Please remember that when we talk, generally when the Bhagavatam mentions senses, it's talking about the subtle abilities, the principle of being able to connect with the world in perception, Gyan Indriya, gaining knowledge through our eyes. It's not necessarily talking directly about the organs. And about our ability to engage actively through the karmendriya, the working senses. So, and the senses presiding deities, who are doing all the hard work. You've read about that. You know, there's different demigods moving your eyebrows and, doing everything. We complain about service we're being given. Can you imagine? Okay, your job is to look after back to Lucas when he, you go. But so that's our material nature is, and it said this is understood by learned men. But the feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. So, although the material energy is caused and operated by others, our own feelings of happiness and distress, we're the cause. It's how we have chosen to engage in this world. And there is something that's very important here. We're transcendental by nature, but that doesn't mean we do not feel pain. When we are experiencing something, you can't say to a devotee, oh, well, pain's not real because you're transcendental. No, because you are a conscious being, what you are feeling is a real conscious experience. It's not nice. You are feeling something real. The illusion is you really shouldn't be in a situation and identifying with that in the way that you're doing. When Krishna admonishes Arjuna in the beginning of the Gita, what does he say? You are grieving for what is not worthy of grief. He doesn't say you shouldn't feel grief. He's not saying grief is an illusion, like the impersonalist might say. He's saying, no, you're feeling grief. But the reason you're feeling grief is because you're worried about something which you really shouldn't be worrying about. And if you change that, you won't feel the grief then. The cause of your unhappiness is you. It's what you are deciding is important, is troubling you, is affecting you, and you're feeling real grief. So what we allow ourselves to be annoyed or sad over, the same principle is there what we allow ourselves to be happy about. We're generating happiness because, something nice happened. And, it's nice. And we're basing most of the time, we're basing our happiness on the plans and the anticipation of something nice happening to us. That's really, where most happiness in this material world comes for the living entity, or particularly for humans. It's the planning that, yes, I can do this and be happy, or I'm working hard, but when I get home, I'll be able to do that. It's always living in the future. It's the longing of the past, feeling some kind of nostalgia, which is a sort of weird, bittersweet happiness, sadness, longing, isn't it? Nostalgia. But it's a way of finding some kind of enjoyment in, dwelling in the past. So that's the nature of the living entity. And these are all things that the mind is very expert at coming up on. So that's the introduction that Kapila gives. That you're a transcendental being, but you're stuck in this material world. Material energy is running everything for you, but you're the one feeling things, and really you're feeling things because of your material consciousness. You have you have dedicated your being to enjoyment in the material world. So then Devahuti says, okay, well, please kindly explain these characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies. For both of these are the causes of the manifest and unmanifest creation. And then there's two verses that begin this. The first, and this is a verse that we're going to explore in more detail when we look at the kind of metaphysics of matter and how consciousness is the driver of material creation, and the combined consciousness of all the living entities is actually the database, if you like, by which the material world is created. Now we're talking in very major terms here. This is not this universe. This is the whole material energy that Kapila is going to start with. You know, the very big picture, that cloud of the spiritual world formed by the transformation of Krishna's energies. So, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state, and is called pradhana. Now, pradhana actually refers to the unmanifested situation. But the unmanifested situation of pradhana, that's the material energy when the modes are present, but they're not activated, they're not causing creation. They're not making anything specific. They are just held in balance. And when the modes are in balance, there is nothing. It's only when they become agitated that things start forming. So it is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So something is going to happen between the state of pradhana, which is just material energy just waiting to be manifest into something. It's just raw energy. You know, it's like just clay, just there. There's nothing. There's no shape, there's no properties, there's no lakshana, there's no characteristics. It's just the raw material. But when it becomes activated with the combination of the three modes, so the understanding, and this is it's the Chaitanya Charitamrita has a wonderful verse which explains that these two aspects that are mentioned here, where's the divim? Oh, probably, sorry, it must be in another one. The divim prakriti. There's the angunamayi. There's the pradhana energy, and there is the gunas. Gunas are one part of the material energy, but they are the information part, whereas prakriti, or the divim prakriti, is the matter part. So this is a really interesting analysis, that the material energy has these two components. Matter equals energy, and information. And it's now an observation by physicists that when they talk about the material world that they are exploring, they don't talk about it being composed of atoms, molecules, or quantum fields. Really, what is it they say? What is at the heart of it all? It's energy. Energy, oh yeah, and energy and information. That's what the material world is made of, energy and information. Now, if the information is going to manifest the material world in the form of universes, species of bodies, all the planets for them, and all the features that we see of the world, what's determining that information? And that's what's explained in this chapter in different places. It's the entry of the jivas, and particularly the jivas citta. The energy of consciousness coming from the jivas is what is being interpreted and read by the gunas. And the gunas are responding to the jivas citta. And it takes this pradhana and turns it into the mahatattva. So when we read about Mahavishnu impregnating the material energy through his glance, and within that glance there is the union of Shiva, the original Shiva, and Shakti, Durga, that is the impregnation of the living entities into the material energy. And the desires and karma of all those living entities that have been housed within Mahavishnu during the time of dissolution, when the material manifestation is avyakta, unmanifest. They've just been held within Mahavishnu. Now it's time for them to go back in. But all their desires, all their karma, all their things, whatever they were into before, that's now going to, that information is going to be used. It's like Krishna has done the ultimate in market research. He knows exactly what his audience wants. What is, he knows all his customers. Every single last quadrillions of them. He knows all the customers and exactly where they're at, what their last purchase was, and he knows, oh, you bought this, maybe you'd be interested in it again, or maybe others have also bought this, right? It's all this. So Krishna knows all of that, and that information of his analysis of each of us with the beginning of the manifestation, he's going to say, all right, well, that's going to take a few universes. It's going to take quite a few to look after you lot. And we're going to have to make sure those universes are quite variegated, because you've got a lot of different stuff going on. So the whole kind of arrangement of the almost unlimited variety that the material universe can offer is contained within those desires of the living entities. So that's going to be covered here. This next verse then says, all of the things that emerge from the pradhana, which are, in one sense, they are there, but in balance and unmanifest. But these are the things that are going to appear from it. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the Mahabhutas, the 5 subtle elements, the Tanmatras. Another time we're going to explore the brilliance of that analysis later in this chapter. And the 4 internal senses, Chatarbhi. The 5 senses for gathering knowledge and the 5 outward organs of action. These are eternal principles of creation, held right there at the beginning. And text 14 explained, so the next few verses explain each of those, but we're going to focus on text 14, that the internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects. In the